Yes, there's
quote unquote
a mythology of the bad boy in American culture, that kind of sexy, primal, spicy guy
right
is gonna win the girl every time at the party, right?
Right. So let me just take this one part out of the equation, which is that yes, I think women can be attracted to a real, like a legitimate bad boy who's going to mistreat them for other reasons. So let's not talk about that.
Okay.
So you know what I mean, like the girl who's like, self bashing or whatever, and she just attracts the wrong kind of guy. Not that. We're talking about like the primal, carnal, alpha guy who is gonna like sweep them off their feet and like take them against the wall and
like, dude, carnal. Keep going.
At least that's what I have going on in my fantasy. Right. We like that.
Well, what's funny is I was about to be like, I'm not into that, and then I thought, well, except for that one guy from that party.
And that other guy.
Well, no, this was, and I talked about it on the show, but basically I ended up hooking up with like it was a party full of like eligible men, and I met like four different. It was quite bountiful, and I met 4 different men. 2 ended up being best friends, which I didn't realize, and I had already I had agreed to go out with one of them the next night, and he was the bad boy. And it's funny that the good boy actually successfully seduced me that night. I went home.
That night?
Yeah, because I was like, I'll give you a ride home, or something about going to another place, and then I said I want to go home, so I dropped him off at home, and then he kind of seduces me before we say goodbye. He's the good boy. He's actually very sweet, and it was almost like the ego and the id. I mean, the stereotype. It was like they were best friends because they complemented each other. Right. But the other one is like total primal animal. Right. And like even at the party said something like, oh, like your family's Colombian. Like I know you guys like, you like the bad boy who, is basically going to like push you against the wall and,
Yeah.
And then he was even like, slap me across the face.
Like that would turn me off.
It was hilarious. He was the definition of bad boy, like total, like James Dean type.
Okay.
And hot.
Right.
Where was I going with that?
Your experience with you.
I'm
ended
sharing.
up with each of them.
Yeah, I'm sharing that it's true that in that case I was drawn in.
Well, okay. Let me say that first of all, I think this question in itself, like. And this was exactly how you phrased the question, which is, how do you balance being a good moral person with having that primal masculine energy women find so attractive? So, in bad boys. So, I think that this question inherently is judgmental.
Yeah, the assumption.
The assumption is that, or not the assumption, the belief, which I get. Like culturally, we do judge against, or that it's wrong or bad somehow, this primal sexual energy.
That if you are
is
primal,
bad.
Yeah, well,
is
also,
wrong. And this is the whole puritanical thing of like, if you just want sex for sex or pleasure for pleasure, it's hedonistic and it's immoral and it's bad.
Ooh,
okay, so,
well said.
So let me just say that I think that's the initial thing, and I think we all have this belief in us to some degree. Interestingly,
we were raised to believe, yeah.
Right. I think the last show we did, I talked about how I was experiencing this like new level of embracing my carnal animal nature sexually.
Yeah.
And and this was happening like in the act of sex, and it was really powerful. And I didn't realize that I was still holding on, and that I still had exactly this going on. That I was judging myself for, and therefore not allowing myself to totally be an quote unquote animal.
But you're being a bad girl.
Right. That I need to like be spiritual and moral and even good and beyond that, and
even the word choice, calling it like bad boy, bad girl, right? Like naughty.
Right.
Like you can't do that.
Okay.
But what are we talking? We're talking about take charge, sex appeal, letting that be known, being a little more assertive with the girl,
yes. Let me So yes, all of that. But what I feel is that this bad boy person, the reason why we're attracted to him is because he is comfortable with his primal nature.
Yes.
So when a guy is comfortable with his primal nature, it means, it can mean that he is in touch with himself, not afraid of himself in that way, has mastered that part of himself, and knows how to use it, but also and that's what, like, that's when a guy becomes hot and primal and magnetic in that way.
Interesting.
Because he's embraced it and it's oozing from him. The equivalent for, I think, for the guy's experience would be a woman who is totally owns her sexuality and isn't afraid of it and isn't, mousy and demure and playing a role. She's like sexy and she knows it. Now here's the difference. So if you're going to turn the line of where a primal carnal alpha man who's comfortable with himself, when he starts turning into a bad boy or immoral person, it's because he's become selfish in that, where he's consuming, abusing the power in a way that, like, he's only he's taking for his own pleasure. He's not thinking about her best interest. He doesn't give a fuck. So he's totally selfish and thinking of himself. So which
I can't lie. I think I've had moments like that.
Yeah, I have not.
I was that girl.
Right. Well, you do have strong needs. I'm not surprised. This is why I sometimes.
Do you mean like my desire to play, like a little cat and mouse? You mean my desire to orgasm?
I mean that your hunger can sometimes, I feel, override your ability to think about the other person's experience and make you focused on you gaining your own experience.
Sure.
That's what I mean.
I think that, I think I was being honest there and saying it. Yeah.
I'm like hiding.
Afraid like I wasn't aware. How dare you? As if you haven't heard my entire history for the last 5 years. I don't know where you got that data. Yeah, I would agree. It's almost like the excitement bug or something. I'm guilty as charged. I think I've matured a lot. I don't think I'm quite where I used to be.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. But just to close out that thought, for me, for you guys out there who are like, how do I manage this? Well, here's the thing. Most guys are not assholes. Most guys are not these, like, selfish, bad, like, really actually harmful, not like rapey harmful, but like, where they're just going to trample all over you. Most guys are not that way.
I want to bring this up. This brings me to, like, even when all of the cultural discussions that are happening about violation and what is it to flirt with a woman and, respecting a woman's space, all these, they are real issues. Mm-hmm. I think that because it's in such common dialogue, even respectful men have started to fear that includes them or something, and they're they're becoming defensive as though they need to defend something that isn't really their problem.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense. It's like a double negative or something. Like, how do you know if you're offending someone until the person tells you that you've offended them, and checking yourself? But I think it's, I guess, a hypersensitivity that.
And so how does it relate? Sorry to this. I'm less on the bouncing ball.
Well, it related to me because of what you were just saying about like this man even being concerned with this idea that, like, well, how can I be masculine and aggressive without, being immoral? And It's like, well, you're not actually crossing a boundary, but you are being playful and being in touch with your sexuality and showing that to someone, and then reading her signals to see if she's receptive to that. And if she's not receptive to it, then you kind of go, all right, cool, I get it. Like, you're not interested in the sexual energy I'm bringing.
Yeah.
It brought up actually just a friend of mine recently. We do have a history where we have had sex, but we don't anymore, and we are friends. And he even said, we were hanging out, we had dinner together, and then he said, do you want to hook up? Do you kind of want to play? And I said, actually, I don't. Mm-hmm. And it's not, he goes, oh, I get it. And I said, but I really, really appreciate and honor that you asked. Like, I want to acknowledge it, because without making me uncomfortable.
But can I say, that is the opposite of this carnal bad boy thing that women love.
That's a
very feminine approach, which is awesome, and in terms of the, like the polyamorous community, sex pot, like, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
So I guess so.
Okay, so back to where you were.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just saying that, like, it's a balance, right? Like, there's a line that needs to be walked, but I think the only way to get there is to actually do some self-work in terms of like allowing yourself to know this part of yourself, men. You know, to instead of, because we live in a culture where you're right, where it's not encouraged for guys to be primal and to like feel raw desire for a woman. And so the way I've experienced this is, and this is sort of like shadow work, right, where like you face this part of yourself, like without acting and without actually going and like taking a stranger against a brick wall without even asking her or whatever. Like there's still power in letting yourself, letting your thoughts go there, letting your mind go there, letting, you know, instead of putting the clamp down and like keeping yourself from having those feelings at all, letting yourself go there and see what that feels like. But so it's confronting it. It's letting it happen, not repressing it.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe that was my point. Was you can express it, and if it's not received, or they say no, thank you, then you back away. I think that was my point of that story. Of you're right. It wasn't an alpha. Like he didn't push me against the wall.
Well, I guess I would say like what I just talked about was self work.
Okay.
Now, if you're gonna.
Yeah, I guess how do you, so I wanted to ask you how. If
you're in front of a woman, well, I guess I feel like this is where the typical James Bond, Don Juan archetype comes in, because these are the guys who are in touch with that primal part of themselves. However, they also have, does James Bond have deep respect for women? I don't know. But let's just like take that like sexual, like the guy who's the magnet for women and they adore him and whatnot, and he, he's not like a total dick, he's just a sex magnet, right? So if you take that kind of guy, he is, his approach with women, it's not like he's coming up to them and being like, you and me in the bedroom now. Like that's, women are going to say, fuck you. You know?
Like that's I had a friend who did that to me.
Right? Oh.
Did it work? No. No, I'm not interested. Like there wasn't a spark to instigate it.
Right. So then I think the balance would be when you're approaching a woman, it's different. Like you still hold her in respect. You treat her with respect. You're thinking about her best interest and like what she likes.
May I?
Can I get you a drink? How can I? What? Go ahead. Yeah.
I like what you said about the James Bond archetype. Immediately, I understood this idea of being in touch with your primal sexuality. So, like to me, I'm a woman. I want to have sex. I do, right? But the context has to be right, and I have to, and also to see that this other person wants that too, and but in a settled, confident way of their, like in knowing their desire, makes me trust like their mastery of it. Like, this is potentially a good lover.
Yes, yeah. What's coming to mind?
I like this raising the hand. We'll raise our hands when we need to speak.
Okay, so the thing is the James Bond guy. It's almost like acting work, where like, so I'm going to call it hunger, that primal drive, I'm going to call it hunger. So he looks at you across the room and he's hungry, and you feel it, and you know it. But the thing is he has control over that hunger. That beast inside of him, he's got that bitch mastered. And he's like, you know what? I can handle my hunger. I'm going to come up to you. So this hunger is swimming around both of you. You can feel it. You can ride this wave, and that like entices the woman. But what entices her even more is the fact that he can set it aside and listen to her and have a conversation and connect and notice that, you're drinking a martini with 3 olives, and he gets, he like whatever, like he
paying attention to the details.
Pays attention to the details and does what he can to please her and shows her that he's paying attention and he's being the gentleman and all of that. Yet he's in touch with that hunger, and he's not denying that hunger.
Can I ask you?
Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. I think it does. I mean, it's yes, and it is a little nebulous. Like it's both. No, I like it, but it is almost like it's like a practice. Like that's like a philosophical idea. So then the gentlemen watching or listening need to kind of head out into the field and try it out.
Yeah, you do. Which is why I think it takes personal work of like if you're not in touch with that primal thing, you need to get to know that primal.
That's true.
First.
Okay. 2 things came out for me. No, 2 things. Okay, okay. Before I say what I was gonna say, it makes me go, okay, Stephanie, how do they get in touch with that? How do they exercise that? Is that, I think it starts with not judging it, and that brings me back to this person's question. Even saying, well, how do I still be a moral, good guy? And I'm going, well, what was it that you thought was immoral?
Right, exactly.
What is it that's immoral? And I do think I've had conversations with gentlemen who I think in having, this brings back, I'm tying full circle my comments before. The intense kind of cultural critiques happening right now have brought men to go, well, it's immoral if I desire her sexually.
Right.
And I'm going, that's not immoral.
Right.
Your desire is not immoral.
Right.
Desire is true, is integral to your being, is your creative energy source, which is based in the genital area, which is, and it's how do you use it and what do you do with it. I think the more you start acknowledging it, the more you're aware that you have desire, the more you become the sexual being that you are. And in whatever forms that manifests, meaning you're more likely to find the partners that best suit you, which are so we're speaking of heteronormative, like men versus women, but seeking a woman who's going to be into your style of sexual desire. Right? So James Bond is an archetype. Everyone's not James Bond, and everyone doesn't want to have sex in that same way. Or play if James Bond is the poster child for bad boy, or James Dean is the poster child, that is one type. And so if you feel that you are that type, I guess, you can play with that, but it is role playing. I mean, that actually came up for me.
No, I don't see it as role playing.
What?
It's not, James, you're not role playing the bad boy. You're simply... Well, I mean, my definition of role playing is putting on a costume and
okay.
I feel like this is
okay. Go ahead. What do you feel?
Well, I mean, it's like the analogy would be, to put it in what guys might understand. Yeah, a woman who's, let's say you're at a bar, and you've got woman A who comes up to you, super sweet, super nice, cute, and she's like, "Hi, how are you? How was your day?" And you guys chat and whatever, and she bats her eyes a little bit, and then she gives you her number, and I'd like to connect and have dinner. Great,
nice.
Normal, okay,
yeah.
Great. Woman B comes up, woman B is standing across the room, and she just looks at you, and you get a hard on, right? She just looks at you with this look because she's oozing this thing, and what she's oozing is that same thing, she's connected to herself in this way, right? And then she's not afraid of that part of herself. She's not afraid of showing it. She's not afraid of inhabiting it. And then she walks up, and you guys don't even talk about mundane stuff. I'm just saying, this is a ballsy woman, you know? And so she comes up, and, it's just super seductive and whatever. But, and it's hypersexual, and guys love that. Now, where she would cross the line is if
she grabbed your ass?
No. Is if she was manipulating you to get something out of you. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you know what came up for me in that?
That's when she becomes the vixen versus the seductress.
Cool. But what I liked about what you're saying, too, though, is when so the sweet person is polite and paying attention, so says, "How was your day?" Honestly, it's a bit of a snoozer. You go to a bar and you have an eye-to-eye contact moment, so you're like, oh God, I feel goosebumps at that person, the equivalent of a hard-on. And then that person comes over and you're like, oh wow, and then that person makes a funny comment about the bartender, or says something about the music, or compliments you, or basically jumps into a conversation rather than small talk. Right? So immediately engaging you in a spontaneous way.
No. And my point is not around the words. The point is the energy. Person A is...
Yeah, but I think that they're twofold. Because Because what we're talking about...
the intent, like person A, whatever the hell she says, she could even come up to you and say, "Oh, I want to take you in the bathroom." But if her energy is not in touch with that, you're not going to be motivated to go to the bathroom with her.
Well, I like what you're saying. This comes back to, right, because you can, this is true of acting classes, no matter what the line is, right? The term "I love you" can be said 40 different ways. So what is the intention behind what you're saying?
What are you in touch with, right? And so the girl A has a problem with accepting. She thinks that there's something bad about being this sexually whatever.
I want to bring up, and I know you initially, earlier we were talking about the approach. And to me, the approach, the idea of a bad guy, I actually see value in BDSM role play. And where I bring that up is, if you go back to our episodes where we talked about BDSM, and when I went to the club and kind of did a little drill with this guy on a dog collar, and and he flogged me or whatever, and it was really eye opening because he had a mastery of his sexuality and desire and his way of expressing his desire for me. Mm-hmm. Now, this was a muscle that was exercised.
Yes, it is a muscle.
He himself was not the current James Bond. He did not look like James Dean. He
don't have to.
Yeah, but he had an intensity and a presence and a confidence about his sexual identity.
Right, and that I think is the alpha assertive male defined.
But I think that can be practiced.
Oh, absolutely.
And by the way, to me, the power of learning the vocabulary of like a BDSM role play is not that you need to stay on script and that there's a rule to it. It's that you are still a moral good person and you've learned a sexual language that dominates or has like an empowered assertiveness.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe even learning the switch, which is when to be submissive and when to dominate, and to even be able to play and interchange.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be a great play. If you guys want to explore that, there's this website called fetlife.com where you can go and like set up a profile anonymously even, and
we'll find out about organized parties that teach you that stuff. Find people who are teachers in that. There's workshops, there's things out there that actually embolden you and make you more confident in that way.
Yeah, you're right. It is a muscle. And here's the funny thing is that as I'm looking at it now, it's like the muscle that rides the middle pathway of Buddhism, for example, where like I feel like our culture is either like we don't, and we talk about this on the show a lot, our frustration with the fact that we don't talk about male desire and like how to harness that, because we don't. Like it's just men are full of desire and they're hungry and they're horny and they have to let it out.
They have to fuck.
The orgasm, it's not about, men aren't taught. It's not talked about holding your orgasm or recycling your sexual energy. None of that is talked about. It's just, I'm so full of this energy and I have to let it go.
And that's how men are.
Right.
Yeah.
So this whole so it's either we encourage that. Right? And so it's just all that desire and that primal, everything you feel, you just release it wildly, okay, which does not make you an alpha male.
Thumbs down.
I mean, that's like the 20-year-old, the 30-year-old, 40, this is why I date older men. Okay, so I know, I'll shut up.
Yeah.
My point, okay, and then, or the opposite of that is a good man who tones that down, represses it even perhaps, and is the good communicator, the guy who's going to listen, which is all the stuff that we want, but without the sexual.
Right. So, are you saying
it's either one or the other?
A combination of the two, exercising both muscles, make you an ideal partner?
Yeah.
A merging of the soul in a way.
This is not a fantasy. This is a reality. Like
and we're talking
about reality.
Yeah. Well, you're hitting on the tenets of a rounded person.
Right.
Ooh,
but it just means you have to embrace both sides, and so, right, yeah.
I had this thought.
So you might be, guys, heavy in one area or the other, and you need to explore the other side.
Yeah.
Go on. Okay, so you had this thought.
No, I had this thought about men and women. And I think that they're, again, collectively in our culture, there's an idea of the male leading. So I think it's very helpful when men are knowledgeable about this stuff. I think it's so great if women can learn a vocabulary around their sexuality as well, because I think women send a lot of mixed signals, and we collectively aren't aware of how unclear we're being as women.
Mm-hmm.
Is that too harsh to?
Well,
hey, ladies, what do you want?
Can you
well, even this idea of like
women
want a bad boy and they want someone to be aggressive, but also like I don't want a guy who does this, or like all the little like things. The more you know yourself, even the more you understand dominant submissive dynamics. Like, that's what our show is about. The core of it is a mastery of self that that makes sure you can identify what's upsetting you, or where you don't feel you're getting fed from your partner, or or whatever. Like, knowing if you do just want primal sex, or I don't know.
Yeah,
are all the tools there.
Yeah, I think at the core, I think it's.
We're gonna take a break soon.
Okay, let me just get this thought. Yeah, I think that. Shit, what was I thinking? No, don't break.
No, I'm not.
Okay, no, I think that. You're right. I mean, at the core, it's. There is a lot of, look, this is what life is, right? There's our internal world and there's our external world, and we're taught things no matter what world or culture we live in, and you're always going to bump up against that. And I think, in our culture, we are taught specific things about being a woman and about being a man and whatnot, and there's a lot of confusion. There's just a lot of confusion about what's okay, what I'm supposed to want, what I'm supposed to feel, And so, I think
more tapping into this
for men and women.
Down here, this, and knowing what you want, because it's different for everyone.
And not just knowing what you want, but you can't know what you want unless you know what's inside of you first. In terms of like. There's a lot of women out there who are not comfortable with their femininity, especially nowadays. So how can you...
Vulnerability?
Right. And then, and surrender. And, but then there's confusion there, because it's like, well, there's this part of me that is somehow primally drawn to wanting this kind of guy, but I also am uncomfortable with it, so there's just, you're getting pulled in many directions.
But I love what you're hitting on, which is... also, women not judging, going, well, I want a bad, I'm into bad boys and that's bad. Again, it's, what are you really saying? You would like someone who dominates or plays that role, has that ability to play that role while still being a sensitive, attentive mate.
Or maybe what she's really drawn to is surrender. Also, so you're right. Really thinking about it and accepting it without judgment, and
knowing that surrender in that context doesn't mean I'm weak.
Right.
Doesn't mean I give over power all the time.
Well,
it's one context.
Yeah, and this is why I feel we need a lot of work to be done around the feminine right now, because we do associate surrender with weak, which I do too. Even now,
you struggle with it.
With all this work, there's still a bone in me that's like, but it's weak, but it's not.
Yeah, you have to remind yourself.
It's actually the strong. So it takes so much strength and courage to surrender. Oh my God.
Beautiful.
Anyway, we're gonna take a break and then we'll come back.
Do we want to say a couple? So we're gonna come back and talk about
finish this conversation.